The desert doesn't wake up all at once. It sighs, long and low, like an old man creaking into his boots. You're there before the sun, watching a pale violet sky stretch over the Nevada basin. The government sedan hums quietly behind you, still ticking with engine heat. You stretch your legs still stiff from the 4-hour drive and blink toward the chain-link fence. It doesn't look like much, but then again, Area 51 isn't the type to look like much. A whispering breeze lifts the hem of your jacket. Dust licks at your shoes. The sand here smells faintly metallic, like it remembers every crash, every test flight, every secret scorched into its crust. You're early. Good. That's expected of new hires, especially the civilian ones. The guard at the booth doesn't smile. You show your badge. He nods, checks a clipboard, and presses a button with no ceremony. The gate groans like it regrets letting you in. You're officially someone with clearance, though to what, you aren't entirely sure. Your job title is Research Technician, which is wonderfully vague. Your field is biophysics, which is even vaguer to the men in olive uniforms who run this place. They know you worked with radiation back in Chicago. That's enough. That, and the fact you didn't ask too many questions during the interview. Here's your one-line warning. You probably won't make it through this day without being extremely confused. But don't worry, that's the baseline around here. Welcome to Area 51. It's June 3rd, 1960. The Cold War is humming along nicely. There are satellites the size of Buicks tumbling overhead, and someone just reported seeing a flying refrigerator over the Mojave. Before we head deeper, if your eyes are still open and your mind's not too foggy, consider gently tapping the like button. It tells the algorithm overlords you enjoy falling asleep to top-secret military facilities. And hey, leave a comment telling us where and when you're tuning in from. We like knowing which time zones are drifting into government conspiracies with us. Now let's ease into tonight's journey. You walk across the dry tarmac, the soles of your shoes slapping the ground with more echo than you expect. A jeep zips past, trailing dust like it's allergic to speed limits. In the distance, a hangar yawns open, revealing the unmistakable shape of something that isn't quite a plane. The man you meet inside introduces himself simply as Dr. Keene. He's wearing a lab coat over a Hawaiian shirt, as though he got dressed for a barbecue and was kidnapped by scientists. He hands you a clipboard. No handshakes, no warm welcome. Just 3 lines. Your duties, your hours, and your canteen code. Keene leads you to your new office. It's underground, naturally. 3 floors down, to be exact. The elevator hums as it descends, its walls a patchwork of scratched steel and motivational posters that haven't aged well. One reads, "Your silence keeps America safe." Another just says hydration is patriotism. The air grows cooler. A faint antiseptic smell like hospital and jet fuel and a child tickles your nose. You arrive in Lab 6B. It's mostly filing cabinets, 2 microscopes, a Geiger counter with duct tape on its side, and a glass case labeled, "Do not touch," still blinking. You set your briefcase down. Your first assignment? Catalog the radiation signatures of several unidentified metal fragments recovered from high-altitude weather incidents. The fragments are pitted, slightly melted, and one smells strongly of nutmeg. You choose not to comment. Odd cultural tidbit for the day. One of the fragments is stored in a coffee tin marked Sanka, 1957. It's government issued, apparently. No one throws anything away here. Not even mysterious, lightly humming space junk. You get to work, not knowing this will be the most normal moment of your entire year. Historians still debate whether Area 51's most secretive programs in 1960 were focused more on experimental aircraft or on materials recovery. Based on what's in your filing cabinet, it might have been both or something in between. A low, oscillating hum becomes your constant companion. It seeps through the walls like a tuning fork struck in the distance. You're not sure if it's electrical, mechanical, or existential. By noon, you've stopped noticing it. This is probably a mistake. Lunch is served in a mess hall painted exclusively in shades of beige. The food is also beige meatloaf, mashed potatoes, and a pudding that quivers when no one's near it. You sit across from an Air Force major who eats in silence, chewing like the act personally offends him. He eyes your badge and nods once. "Civilian, huh?" he says, between bites. They usually don't last. Comforting. Back in Lab 6B, you notice something peculiar about one of the fragments. It's cold, unusually cold, and it doesn't warm up. Not in your hand, not under the desk lamp, not even wrapped in a damp towel. You log the anomaly in your notes, but when you go to the shared terminal to enter it officially, the system flags your entry and immediately deletes it. You try again, same result. This time, a red line of text appears. "Incorrect protocol, please see drive." Keen, you do, and he sighs like a man who's had this conversation 20 too many times. "Just don't input things that haven't been cleared," he mutters. "Write it on paper, keep it in your drawer. Trust me." You do as instructed, and your drawer slowly becomes a graveyard of half-researched anomalies. One fragment emits a high-frequency pulse every 47 seconds. Another reacts to proximity by warping compass needles within a 6-foot radius. One, you swear, gave you a headache shaped like a triangle. Here's today's obscure gem. In 1960, Area 51 allegedly tested a device nicknamed the Chime, which was said to disrupt birds' navigational systems within a 10-mile radius. One test reportedly caused every pigeon in Las Vegas to fly in perfect circles for 8 hours. By 3 p.m., the power flickers twice. No one mentions it. You pass a hallway where a mop and bucket are cordoned off with crime scene tape. A janitor stands guard. You don't ask. You meet your neighbor in the lab. Across the hall, a woman named Cynthia. She's working on synthetic skin prototypes, supposedly for flight suits. She winks and says, "Or maybe just aliens with dry elbows." You laugh politely, then quietly write synthetic dermis oddities in the margin of your notebook. As the day winds down, you finally ask the question that's been squatting in the back of your mind, like a cat refusing to leave a suitcase. So what exactly are we studying here? Dr. Keene just says, behavioral physics. You stare. Of what, you ask? Depends on the day. Historians still debate whether behavioral physics was an actual research field or just a bureaucratic placeholder for weird stuff that moves on its own. You clock out at 5 o'clock sharp. Outside, the sun is low, stretching long shadows across the tarmac. The wind has changed. It smells now of ozone and faintly of burnt rubber. A loudspeaker crackles overhead. Attention. Code Indigo is now in effect. All non-essential personnel return to dormitory sectors. You are, apparently, non-essential. A jeep arrives before you can ask what Code Indigo is. Cynthia hops in beside you and says, "Don't worry. It's probably not contagious this time." You try to sleep in your bunk that night, but the ceiling hums like a held breath. Your pillow smells faintly of antiseptic and ink. Somewhere deep in the base, a low siren moans once, then falls silent. And you wonder, not for the first time that day, whether your clearance level includes the right to dream. Morning doesn't so much arrive as flicker into being, like a fluorescent bulb reluctantly dragged out of sleep. You wake in the dormitory's narrow bunk, face half-creased by a government-issue pillow and ears still humming with last night's residual siren. You're not sure what Code Indigo meant, but no one mentioned it at breakfast, so you assume that means it's either classified or embarrassingly routine. The mess hall is quieter than yesterday. The pudding is still trembling. You carry your tray toward the same beige corner when a man in a full flight suit stops you. His eyes are hidden behind aviator sunglasses, which seems unnecessary indoors. You the biophysics guy? He asks. You nod cautiously. Come with me, he says. You're on flight watch today. Flight watch? You weren't told about any flight watch. Your job description definitely did not mention anything involving altitude. But before you can protest, you're escorted to a low-slung building behind Hangar 12. The air out here is different, sharper, thinner. A line of desert bighorns watches from a distant ridge, utterly still. Inside the building, you're handed a clipboard and a headset. You're told to observe, nothing more. The glass observation room overlooks a short runway, and beyond it, miles of cracked earth leading to dry mountains. Then it appears. A matte black object, the shape of an isosceles triangle, drifts silently above the ground, maybe 30 feet up. No visible engines, no visible seams. It doesn't fly so much as glide forward, like it's politely ignoring gravity. You scribble notes you're sure no one will ever read, such as glide forward, like it's politely ignoring gravity. You scribble notes you're sure no one will ever read. This has no intakes, no visible canopy, no wings, just a hovering triangle that occasionally emits a sound like a zipper being pulled in reverse. No one around you reacts like it's unusual. You ask a technician beside you what you're looking at. He shrugs. It's just Wednesday. Obscure cultural tidbit. During the 1960s, local ranchers near Groom Lake claimed their cattle would occasionally go stiff all at once, like synchronized taxidermy. The Air Force said it was just dehydration. The ranchers said it was the air changing moods. Your shift ends without incident. You return to Lab 6B to find your desk has been moved 6 inches to the left, and no one will admit to doing it. Your drawer full of paper notes? Reorganized alphabetically. You never organize them alphabetically. You've never seen your notes so tidy, in fact. Dr. Keene swears it wasn't him. Maybe you're finally developing good habits, he says, and smirks. You eye the blinking glass case. Still blinking. Probably unrelated. Historians still debate whether any triangular aircraft flying silently in 1960 were experimental U.S. projects or something. Borrowed. Later that evening, you dream of walking triangles with soft metallic voices and too many legs. You wake up briefly around 2 a.m., sit up, and swear the light under your door flickers twice once long, once short. You're getting used to the smell. Not just the antiseptic and engine grease. There's something else now, a faint, ozone-soaked scent that seems to linger in the hallway outside Lab 6B. It reminds you of lightning, or the inside of an old vacuum tube. On the docket today, magnetic field analysis. You're handed a box labeled Sample 9R. It looks at first glance like a piece of aluminum foil that lost a knife fight. Warped, pitted, edges curled as though it melted and tried to pull itself into a shape it couldn't quite remember. You place it under the field scanner. The results are nonsense. The magnetic signature keeps flipping orientation every 13 seconds, like a compass in a blender. You try again. Same result. Keene walks by, sees the screen, and casually throws a towel over it. Write it down. Don't record it electronically, he says. You're starting to sense a pattern. That afternoon, a woman from Department C, no one will say what Department C does, visits your lab. She's impeccably dressed, in a way that feels vaguely threatening. She asks you a series of odd questions. Have you had any headaches? Yes. Are you sleeping through the night? No. Any nosebleeds, memory loss, or misplaced time? Define misplaced. She jots something down, smiles. You're acclimating, she says. Then she leaves. Odd tidbit of the day. One of the base's internal memos from 1960 listed the symptoms of exposure fatigue as including apathy toward structural anomalies and diminished surprise at impossible materials. You're beginning to understand what that means. Later, in the hallway, Cynthia catches up with you. She's excited. "Come with me. I want to show you something weird," she says, as though that's not the tagline for this entire facility. She leads you down a tunnel you've never noticed before, unmarked, dimly lit, oddly humid. At the end is a room filled with sealed tanks. Each tank contains a gelatinous, translucent tube floating in thick fluid. Inside each cube, ordinary household items. A stapler, a shoe, a rubber duck. Only the rubber duck is vibrating slightly. She explains, "These are resonance matrices. Or at least, that's what we're calling them. They react to frequency shifts or emotional intensity." You raise an eyebrow. "Yeah," she says, "it's weird. Don't tell anyone I brought you here." Historians still debate whether resonance matrix storage was a legitimate military experiment or just someone's attempt to label a hallway full of mildly cursed jello. You return to your room that night and find your watch ticking backwards. You put it in the drawer with your other belongings. It stops ticking entirely. You make a mental note not to trust any object that's been in a tank. And as you fall asleep, the humming in the walls feels warmer, more melodic, like a lullaby you don't remember learning. You begin your fourth day with a new habit, checking whether the floor tiles in the hallway outside your room are in the same pattern they were the night before. This morning, one is green. None of them were green yesterday. You step over it just in case. The air outside is heavy, unusually so, like the whole sky had a bad dream. Clouds loom in strange shapes over the desert basin, low and long like chalk, smudges on a blue-black slate. A siren blares once short, loud, and ignored. Cynthia waves at you from across the mess hall with a spoon of oatmeal already mid-air. Today's task, you've been reassigned to the acoustic chamber. It sounds harmless, cozy even, but the moment you step inside, you understand why the technician hands you a pair of earplugs with a sympathetic look. The walls are layered with a soft, matte material that drinks every sound you make. Your footsteps vanish into the floor. Your breathing becomes a suggestion, not a noise. When you try to speak, your voice feels like it's being swallowed whole. Your job is to observe a black cube suspended from the ceiling by a wire. No one tells you what it is. It doesn't appear to do anything until you move. Every time you take a step, the cube shifts slightly, sometimes spinning a few degrees, sometimes vibrating like a fly trapped in amber. The clipboard instructions say, move, wait, record, no explanation, no expected outcome. You walk in a circle. The cube hums, faintly at first, then louder, a low harmonic drone like an orchestra tuning from the bottom up. You freeze. The cube stops. Your heart beats faster, and the cube emits a second tone, almost in sync with your pulse. You walk again, this time erratically, and the tone wavers with you, sometimes rising into a shrill edge, sometimes dropping into a bone-dry rumble that seems to vibrate your teeth. At one point, the cube hums out what sounds eerily like the first three notes of Daisy Bell. You leave the room early, noting that the technician outside has his own set of noise-canceling headphones and looks like he's aged 5 years since this morning. Historical fact: during the Cold War, the U.S. military did indeed experiment with infrasonic weapons, low-frequency sound waves that could disorient, nauseate, or theoretically stop enemy soldiers. None were officially deployed. Officially. Today's weird cultural artifact. One memo from 1959 references Project Hushmouth, a supposed attempt to create rooms so silent that test subjects began to hallucinate within 15 minutes. Some claimed to hear whispers. One said he heard his mother calling from the sink drain. You get lunch with Cynthia again. She seems more animated than usual. They gave me access to the lower containment records, she says, beaming like she just got promoted to Queen of the Classified. You wouldn't believe the diagrams. Some of the biological samples have bones arranged like Mobius strips. And I'm not even talking metaphors. They literally twist inward on themselves. You nearly choke on your soup. She grins. Also, do you want to come see a wall that bleeds on command? You do. Of course you do. Historians still debate whether the so-called biomimetic anomalies, cataloged at Groom Lake in 1960, were actual alien artifacts or creative Cold War misdirections. The people cataloging them rarely wrote memos with adjectives like comfortable or predictable. That night, back in your bunk, you realize the green tile in the hallway is now gone. In its place, a slightly warmer patch of floor. You don't ask. You just sleep. Well, you try. Your next day begins with a physical. It's not on your schedule. No one asked. A uniformed man knocks precisely once at 6 a.m. and says only. Medical. Now. You're guided through a hallway you haven't seen before, one lit in soft red hues that make everyone look vaguely sinister, like they've just emerged from a noir film. The clinic smells like rubbing alcohol and burnt toast. A nurse asks you to remove your shirt and socks, then runs a scanner over your back. You swear you feel it humming slightly off-key. Have you been experiencing any unusual dreams? She asks, like it's a blood pressure reading. You consider lying. You don't. She nods without looking up. That's common, usually after prolonged proximity to materials in Sublevel 4. You ask if you've been to Sublevel 4. She pauses, then replies, not officially. You are handed a vitamin packet and told to drink more water. Today's assignment is delightfully analog, reviewing microfilm, logs for 1958. You're told to look for patterns. What kind of patterns? You'll know them when you see them. Hours pass. The logs are handwritten in tiny block letters. Some are redacted. Others are covered in coffee stains, shaped suspiciously like letters. You find at least 3 entries describing bioluminescent fog that follows personnel. Another mentions chimes heard inside closed vehicles. Your eyes blur from reading. You take a break and find a vending machine in the hallway that sells aspirin, soda, and chewing gum with names you've never seen before. You buy a pack labeled Buzz Free for mental clarity during unscheduled events. Tastes like chalk and mint. Later, you pass through the main hangar again and spot a tarp being pulled off something wrong. A dome, maybe, or a vessel. It reflects light oddly, like it's rejecting color. Odd tidbit of the day. One base janitor in 1960 claimed that certain storage rooms would go deaf when specific objects were inside. No sound entered, no sound left. Tools went missing. Voices felt like they bounced back an inch short. Cynthia finds you again in the hallway. She's holding a folder thick with diagrams. Guess what? She whispers. We might be working with a life form that doesn't have a fixed mass. Its weight changes when you don't look at it. You stare. Yeah, she says. We had to build a room with windows on all sides just to measure it. We call it the eye box. You nod slowly. That's not terrifying at all. Historians still debate whether any such experiments were real or simply highly classified containment studies for unstable materials. One internal joke from 1960, if it doesn't weigh the same on Thursdays, it's probably alive. You return to your room just as the lights dim for curfew. Your drawer is locked. You didn't lock it. You lie in bed and think about weightless fog and whispering tubes. Outside, the wind sounds like a tape being rewound. The green tile is back, and this time, it's warm to the touch. You wake up to a note. It's tucked neatly beneath your pillow, printed on stiff cardstock that smells faintly of eucalyptus. One sentence, center aligned, crisp and clear. Today, observe only. Do not interfere. You don't know who wrote it. No signature, no logo. But somehow, It's in the exact same typeface as the internal signage on base. Creepy fonts, apparently, are part of the uniform. At breakfast, no one mentions anything out of the ordinary, unless you count the part where the eggs taste like static and the coffee vibrates in your cup before you drink it. The mess hall seems thinner today, not less crowded, just stretched, as if someone pulled it from both ends like warm taffy and forgot to let go. You don't ask. You simply chew your vibrating coffee-flavored toast and move on. Today's destination, the East Observation Deck. You've never been there. You've never heard of there. But your new schedule, printed in red ink instead of the usual blue, simply says, report to EO1 at 0900. No devices. No note-taking. Eyes only. A young man with a clipboard and no name meets you at the elevator. He wears mirrored sunglasses indoors and doesn't speak. He escorts you through a concrete corridor where even your footsteps seem to hesitate. The room, once you arrive, is a half-dome made entirely of black glass. You realize you're underground, deep underground, but you can see something through the glass. A bright chamber on the other side, lit as if by daylight. And in that chamber, something moves. At first you think it's an animal, 4 limbs, slightly hunched, but then it walks in a way that your brain tries to flatten into human and fails. It moves with fluid hesitations, pausing in odd intervals, like a film with missing frames. Its skin appears reflective, but not in a mirror, sense more like a memory of chrome. You blink, and it changes posture. You are told not to write anything down. So you don't, but you memorize everything. Historical fact, in 1960, multiple facilities across the U.S. reported research under the classification EBE, or extraterrestrial biological entity, though some insist this acronym was only invented later, in retrospect, to justify storage expenses. The thing in the chamber moves to the far wall and places its palm against the glass. You feel, distantly, a warmth on your own hand. A static charge rises under your skin. You step back. The warmth fades. The sunglasses clipboard man nods once, then leads you away without comment. No one speaks of what you saw. You don't either. You just find yourself that night, drawing it in your notebook poorly, instinctively, like a dream image that's trying to stay remembered. Obscure cultural tidbit. 1 base wide. Rumor claimed there was a hallway that could only be walked in one direction. If you tried to go the other way, the lights flickered and the temperature dropped by 20 degrees. They called it the one-way corridor. No one ever wrote down what was at the end. You go to sleep early that night, exhausted in a way you don't know how to describe. Your dreams are quiet but crowded. And when you wake up, the green tile is gone again. But now there are 2 warm ones, side by side. You're starting to forget what day it is. Time here doesn't move in clean 24-hour loops. It spirals. It overlaps. You feel like you've slept through some things and been awake for others you weren't supposed to see. Today, your schedule simply reads, Debrief Room 7K. You didn't think you had anything to debrief. You haven't left the base, haven't submitted a report. But you go anyway, because what else are you going to do? Ask questions? The debrief room is stark. 1 table, 2 chairs. A glass of water that's already sweating, even though the room is freezing. A woman walks in. She has a soft voice and a clipboard that seems identical to every other clipboard on the base. She doesn't sit. Instead, she begins listing statements. And you're supposed to respond. You observed unknown phenomena in EO1? Yes. You experienced physical warmth corresponding to the entity's presence? Yes. You refrained from written or verbal analysis? You nod. She pauses. Have you ever felt like the base is watching you? You open your mouth, then close it. She writes something. That's common. Afterward, You return to Lab 6B, but something's different. The blinking glass case is missing. You ask Keen. He shrugs. It's being recalibrated, he says, like that's something you should be able to do to a glass box that blinks. Instead, you're handed a folder containing reports on persistent geophysical anomalies. You recognize one location immediately: Groom Lake. Inside the folder, maps marked with subtle depressions in local gravity, elevation shifts that return to normal after 48 hours. One page simply reads, Hill 24 turned upside down, corrected itself by morning. You want to laugh. You don't. Today's strange historical note: Groom Lake is in fact a dry lake bed. But during the 1960s, weather records from the area occasionally list unexplained localized precipitation. One entry reads, "It rained in a 20-meter circle for 11 minutes. Skies clear. No clouds present. Cynthia drops by in the afternoon. She seems jittery. I've been reassigned," she says. New sector. No clearance overlap. You ask her where. She gives you a look. I'm not that cleared yet. You wish her luck. She leans in, whispering. If they ever ask you to go to sublevel 7, say no. You nod. That night, you find the hallway to your room is completely dark. Not power outage dark, intentionally dark. Like someone painted over the lights. You walk by feel. The green tile is back. But now, it's humming. By now, the green tile has become your roommate. It hums when you pass. Sometimes faintly, sometimes with a low, almost affectionate growl, like a cat you've accidentally offended. It doesn't always appear in the same place. This morning, it's near the stairwell, blinking softly under the emergency light. You nod to it like you would an old neighbor. It hums back. No one else seems to notice. Today's assignment is entirely new. Environmental Simulation Review, Sublevel 5, Sector D. You're given a heavy coat, a set of insulated boots, and a card labeled Sim 5 B Temp Variant 003. The technician issuing them says nothing, but does look you up and down, like he's wondering if you've written a will. The elevator shudders more than usual on the way down. By the time it dings open, your ears pop. You step out into what can only be described as a tundra. Sublevel 5, Sector D is cold. Arctic cold. Not turn up the heat, cold. But hope your eyelashes don't freeze, cold. Snow crunches beneath your boots, real snow, not simulated. The walls are domed and glassy, giving the illusion of being under a frozen lake. You can see pale light filtering through the frost above. In the center of this chamber is a structure that looks suspiciously like a hunting, blind-raised wooden platform, ladder, tiny hatch door. You are told to go up and observe. Inside the blind, there's a console, a large screen with a blinking cursor. The words? Query. Behavioral response to controlled environment beneath that, a blinking field. You sit in silence. After 5 minutes, the screen displays another sentence. If you could be somewhere else, where would you be? You type, home. It replies, you are, then goes dark. Your breath clouds in front of you, and you realize your boots are now wet. The snow's melted under you, just you. A perfect circle of warmth. Historical fact. In the 1950s and 60s, the military constructed several extreme weather chambers across the country to simulate Arctic warfare. None were confirmed to have snow with detectable salinity or rooms that responded to philosophical questions. Today's obscure tidbit. A janitorial log from 1960 references Sector Cold Box, noting that after extended time inside, personnel often felt watched from beneath. The log was signed only G. It was later redacted. When you leave the blind, you find your footprints have vanished from the snow. The technician outside nods like that was expected. He hands you a thermal blanket and a cup of something thick and gray. You sip it. It tastes like warm mushrooms and static. You ask, was that a test? He replies, which part? Back in your room, you find something taped to the inside of your door. A photograph. Black and white. Faded. It shows the hallway outside Lab 6B, but from the ceiling's perspective. And you're in it, standing on the green tile, looking straight up. There's a leak in the ceiling above your bunk. Not water, but light. It drips in slow, silent pulses, glowing faintly blue before evaporating midder. You touch your pillow. Dry. You blink at the ceiling. The drip slows, then stops. When you get up to look again, it's gone. Today's assignment is strange even by Area 51 standards. Your badge now grants you access to Archives Vault Delta, a concrete cavern 2 stories tall, filled floor to ceiling with reels, film canisters, punch cards, and strange, unlabeled boxes wrapped in layers of gray cloth. The archivist is a man with a hearing aid and a laugh like dry paper. You're looking for Collection P7, he says. That's the one they only give to people who've already seen too much. Comforting. P7 consists of a single reel of 16mm film, labeled Incident Log, May 22, 1955, Grue West Quadrant. You watch it on an ancient projector in a darkened side room. The footage is grainy, jerky, and silent. It shows 4 men in radiation suits standing around a crater. One lowers a Geiger counter, and the others back away. The next few frames show what looks like movement from inside the crater. Something rising, coiling. The film jumps, skipping seconds. When the picture stabilizes, the 4 men are gone. In their place, a flat circle of scorched glass. No explanation. No follow-up footage. The screen goes black. You rewind. Watch again. Still gone. You ask the archivist if there are written reports. He smiles gently. No one who saw that reel ever found a second reel. Today's cultural curiosity. A post-it note from the back of the projector says, if IT starts talking back, unplug and walk away. Historians still debate whether footage from Groom West was ever real, or if it was fabricated to frighten or condition new recruits. Some claimed it was part of a psychological threshold test. Others said it was just a way to keep people from asking about Groom East. You leave the archive a little colder than you went in. Back in the lab, you notice something has changed about the hallway again. The warm tiles have multiplied. There are now 4 of them, arranged in a perfect square. You stand in the middle. The overhead light flickers once, then steadies. You look down and realize the tiles are no longer warm. They're pulsing. You step off. The pulsing stops. You don't mention this to anyone. That night, just before you fall asleep, you hear something whisper just outside your door. It doesn't knock. It just says, "We remember." Then silence. And the green tile? Gone. There is a memo taped to your door, typed on thick, yellowing paper with faded ink and a faint oil stain in the corner. It reads, effective immediately. Your observation privileges have been extended to non-Euclidean geometry and spatial logic lab, sublevel 6C. Wear soft-soled shoes. Do not run. You read it 3 times. The last sentence keeps bothering you. The elevator to 6C takes longer than usual. There's a moment somewhere between the 5th and 6th sublevels where the lights dim and the sensation of sinking is replaced with something sideways. Your stomach shifts like it's been handed to someone else. When the doors open, you're greeted by a hallway that curves in a direction you can't quite name. It bends, but doesn't turn. You walk forward and somehow end up behind yourself. You try not to think about it. A man in a white coat and no shoes greets you. Welcome, he says brightly, to the fun house. You want to leave already. The spatial logic lab is a room or a series of rooms, perhaps that reconfigure as you walk through them. The floor pitches gently. Doors vanish. Walls arrive late to their own appointments. There is no visible technology, just chalk lines drawn at odd angles across the ceiling and a series of clocks ticking independently at different speeds. Your task: follow the red string. A literal one. It's tied to your belt and unwinds behind you. To get back, says the barefoot man, you'll want to follow it in reverse, but only if the room is blue. If it's green, wait. If it's red, duck. You ask, duck what? He just smiles and closes the door behind you. Inside, you follow the string through a world that doesn't behave. Steps become ramps. Light has corners. At one point, you find yourself walking down a hallway that contains a slightly younger version of you walking the other direction, looking annoyed. You don't wave. Eventually, the room turns blue. You retrace the string, and this time, the space stays still just long enough to let you out. Historical fact. In 1960, theoretical physicist Hugh Everett's many worlds interpretation was still considered fringe. But rumors swirled around military think tanks attempting to simulate variable geometry to test the shape of space under pressure. Today's strange tidbit. One base incident log describes a man who entered sublevel 6C and reappeared exactly 6 seconds, later older by 4 years, and holding a newspaper from 1967. He refused to explain. He was later reassigned to Antarctica. You return to Lab 6B dazed and sweating. Dr. Keene offers you a cup of something clear and fizzy. Spatial bleed? He asks casually. You nod. Yeah, he says. That'll pass, or you'll adapt. One of those. That night, you find the green tile waiting in your room. Just one. Quiet. Not blinking. You step on it. Nothing happens. Then, much later, as you lie awake, you realize your ceiling is gone. In its place, stars. Far too many stars. And one of them moves. Your new clearance level arrives without fanfare. A laminated badge tucked into your lunch tray under the mashed peas. It's labeled Tier Echo, temporary access. No explanation. No briefing. You ask Keene, and he just shrugs. Probably an error. Or a test, or both. Your first Tier Echo task. Catalog a series of non-vocal communications stored in magnetic tape archives on sublevel 3. The tapes are unmarked. The labels read things like Session 14, Light Pulse Response, and EM Variation B. You sit at an ancient console with analog headphones, which smell faintly of rubber and coffee. The first tape is silent, utterly silent. Then suddenly, a tone of crystalline chime that seems to play inside your skull. Not loud, not painful, just present. Then another tone. Then silence. You play the second tape. This one pulses. A slow, rhythmic beat that begins to sync with your breathing. You feel calm. Your fingers tingle. Then the pulse stutters, and your hand jerks, completely on its own. You stop the tape. Breathe. Repeat. Some of these tapes don't play through speakers. They only function through the headset. Others make the room feel colder. One makes you weep, gently, for no reason you can name. You note them all. In pen, on paper. You're not allowed to type them into the system. Cynthia appears behind you sometime after the third tape. Tier Echo, she says, raising an eyebrow. Interesting. Did they show you the pulse room yet? You say no. She grins. Oh, then you're still human. Probably. Strange cultural curiosity. Base folklore includes something called the listening ghost. Supposedly, when someone spends too long with the tapes, they start hearing echoes of themselves before they speak. A few began predicting their own sentences. One spoke a full paragraph in reverse, perfectly. Historical uncertainty. Scholars still debate whether the U.S. military ever attempted to create direct neural communication through electromagnetic sound structures. If they did, It never left Groom Lake, officially. That night, you sit alone in your room and listen not with headphones, but with your whole body. The bass is humming again. You don't dream. Or rather, you dream you're someone else. A woman in a silver suit, walking through an endless orchard beneath a green sky. She hums a tune you've never heard. When you wake, you're humming it too. And your badge? It now says Tier Echo. Confirmed. Something is different today. Everyone walks a little slower. The halls are quieter, but not empty more, like the base itself is holding its breath. You receive no assignment this morning. Your schedule simply reads, wait. You sit at your desk in Lab 6B, pencil in hand, paper blank. Even the blinking case, which reappeared overnight, has gone still. No light, no hum. It almost looks asleep. After 20 minutes of silence, your door clicks. It doesn't open. It doesn't lock. It just clicks. You step into the hallway and find Cynthia waiting. She's wearing a new badge silver instead of red. She doesn't speak at first. Then, softly, they're starting the listening trial. She doesn't explain what that means. She just says, come with me. You walk together through 3 checkpoints, 1 retinal scanner, and what appears to be a hallway made entirely of rusted copper. It smells faintly like wet pennies and ozone. It's cold in a way that feels like memory rather than temperature. The room you enter is dark, large, circular. There's a shallow bowl-shaped platform at the center, and lining the walls are seats. Maybe 20 people, scientists, soldiers, and one very still man in a suit you'd swear is from another decade, are already seated, silently watching. The platform hums once, and a voice speaks, not from speakers, not aloud, but into your chest. You don't understand the words, but you feel them. Like music played backward, underwater, beautiful and incorrect. The air in the room seems to ripple like a heat mirage. You find yourself blinking faster. Everyone does. The voice continues, then stops. Dr. Keene stands up across the room and says quietly, still responsive, that's good. No oscillation drift. We continue. No one claps, no one speaks. Everyone files out. You're last to leave. As you pass the threshold, the hum behind you increases, then drops to silence. Outside the door, Cynthia finally whispers, that wasn't a voice. Not really. It's a memory of one. Historical fact. In the late 1950s, researchers at Groom Lake were authorized to experiment with long-range signal analysis using radio telescopes aimed not at the stars, but at specific geological faults. The signals they found were not repeatable, and some appeared to respond to playback. Today's obscure note: a 1960 index card retrieved from an internal incident archive reads, in shaky handwriting, if the signal ever harmonizes with your heartbeat, leave the room. That evening, you find your bed has been remade, perfectly. Tucked corners, fresh linens, new pillow. On the pillow, a small device square, metallic, silent. You don't remember bringing it in. And there is no note. Your dreams are changing. You no longer dream as yourself. Now you drift as things without form. Wind across desert glass, data streaming across coils, a signal refracted through salt and memory. You wake rested somehow. Outside your door, the hallway lights stutter in a rhythm you recognize. 3 long, 2 short. Morse code. You check the chart in your drawer. It translates to now. There's no time to dress fully. You throw on your boots and coat and follow the pattern of flickering lights. They lead you to a freight elevator you've never seen before, larger, older. There's no button. The door just slides open. Inside, darkness. And a mirror. As the elevator descends, the mirror fogs briefly, and your reflection doesn't fog with it. You reach sub-level 8. The door opens into a desert, not metaphorically. A literal sandy expanse under a high, hazy dome. You hear wind, distant thunder, but the air doesn't move. Ahead stands a structure shaped like a spire, twisting as though halfway turned to look at something. It glows faintly with a soft internal light. Dr. Keene stands there waiting. "We're ending your temporary clearance today," he says. "But not because you failed, because you're no longer observing. You're part of the variable set now." You ask what that means. He just nods toward the spire. "Go inside." You walk toward it. The sand under your boots resists slightly, like it's remembering other footsteps. When you reach the spire's base, a door opens without noise or scenes. Inside, it's dark but warm. You take one step in, and silence, not the absence of sound, the displacement of it. Like something made room for you by pushing the rest of reality an inch to the left. Inside, you are shown something. Not a vision, not a screen, something internal. You feel the shape of time folding into itself. You see your own memories, cataloged in strange syntax. You remember stepping on the green tile for the first time. You understand what it was. It was a door. Always a door. Historical fact. The original plans for Area 51 included a subterranean research wing never completed officially, due to funding. Unofficially, some say it was built anyway, but not by the same hands. Obscure cultural note. A phrase carved into the floor of sublevel 8 reads, in Latin, "Non nobis cogitari est, sed resonare." Roughly, we are not here to think, but to echo. You emerge hours later, though your watch still reads the time you entered. Cynthia meets you in the corridor. She doesn't ask what you saw. She just says, "Some things echo louder than others." Your clearance badge is gone. Not revoked, not confiscated. Simply gone. In its place, a folded slip of paper in your pocket. "Thank you for participating. We remember." No signature. Of course, you're reassigned back to Lab 6B quietly, as if none of it ever happened. The blinking glass case is still there, still blinking. But now, when it flashes, it seems to sync just slightly with the pattern of your breath. You return to your tasks, cataloging, labeling, filing. No more sublevels, no more humming tiles, no more backward dreams. Everything is normal. Except, of course, it isn't. You see things now. Small things. People walking in and out of rooms that no longer exist. A flicker in the hallway mirror that follows slightly too late. Notes that appear in your drawer in handwriting that might be yours, but a version of you with better penmanship. Cynthia waves from across the mess hall. You nod back. Neither of you says a word. There's nothing to say. You've seen behind the page, and it's still turning. You're not sure how many days have passed since the spire. Time feels worn around the edges. Eventually, your original assignment is declared complete. You're scheduled for departure. Debriefing, civilian transport. But you know, in a quiet, unspeakable way, that you'll never really leave. That night, you lie in your bunk, the hum returning like a heartbeat you've adopted. Your ceiling is intact, but you remember the stars, and you remember the one that moved. And now, you breathe. Let the images fade, soft as dust swirling in a shaft of sun through a desert window. Let the humming fade into the hush of night, that kind of silence that isn't empty, but full. Full of echoes, half-memories, almost questions. The sound a metal door makes when it thinks of closing. Feel the coolness of the sub-level air dissolve into something gentle. The concrete beneath your feet is gone now, and in its place, sand, soft and warm, shifting beneath the stars. You are no longer walking. You are floating, light as static, heavy with meaning you don't need to understand. Your breath slows. There is no clipboard in your hand now, no badge on your chest, just your heartbeat, quiet and familiar. echoing in a way that feels almost like music. Drift past the blinking light. Don't worry, it's not watching you anymore. Float beyond the green tile. It remembers you, but it doesn't need you to return. Let the sky fold down around you like a blanket stitched from late-night radio static and soft military paper. Let the hum become a lullaby. Let the memory of something unexplainable hold you gently, like an old friend who never really left. You've made it to the edge of the map and found there was still ground beneath your feet. And now, let go. Let your breathing deepen. Let your limbs rest. Nothing here will follow you out of sleep. Not unless you ask it to. So sleep. And if you dream of stars blinking too slowly, or hallways that remember your name, that's all right. Just echo back, good night. The mountains are quiet in the way only ancient things know how to be. They don't shout, they don't blink, they just wait. Still, patient. Draped in mist like someone who knows their story doesn't need an introduction. You're here, just before dawn, where the tree-covered ridges of northern Japan fold into one another like lines in an unread poem. The air smells of cedar, snowmelt, and incense. If peace had a temperature, it might be this. You walk along a dirt path, barely wider than your own shadow, up toward a weathered wooden temple, pressed against the slope like a barnacle on a sea-washed rock. The wood groans under your feet, and somewhere in the rafters, a bird opens one eye and decides you're not interesting enough to flee from. Inside, a monk begins his morning ritual. You sit quietly, unnoticed, perhaps unnoticeable, as he arranges thin slips of paper, scoops a ladle of bitter tea, and begins to chant, not loudly, but with the low rhythm of someone singing to their own bones. This man, whose name you'll soon know, has chosen a path very few have walked. He is trying, quite literally, to disappear on purpose, slowly and with meticulous dedication. You've heard of Egyptian mummies, perhaps Incan ones. But what if someone chose, over many years, to become one, voluntarily, and while still very much alive? Here's your cheeky warning. You probably won't make it through this day without questioning some life choices, especially your snack habits. If you're still with us and haven't already dozed off to the sound of wind through temple bells, please consider liking the video. We make these stories for gentle dreamers like you, and every little signal helps us reach more sleepy souls. Feel free to comment your location and your local time. We're always curious who's drifting into this strange little corner of history with us. Now let's ease into tonight's journey. The man's name is Tetsuya Kai, a Shingon Buddhist monk. He's in his mid-50s, though the folds around his eyes suggest a life of rigorous practice, waking before sunrise, meditating until his limbs forget they're meant to move, and speaking only when silence has been fully understood. He is about to embark on the Sakushinbutsu path. This is not metaphor. Sakushinbutsu is the ancient practice of self-mummification, a real, physical transformation pursued over years, through extreme discipline, ritual, and quiet endurance. It is, in short, the slowest and most permanent retreat from the world. It begins not with sarcophagi or golden wrappings, but with a diet, a very specific one. For the first 1,000 days, Tetsuya Kai will eat only nuts, seeds, roots, pine needles, and tree bark gathered from the surrounding forest. Nothing fermented, nothing cooked. Just nature in its rawest, most stubborn form. This is called Mokujiki-ju, literally, tree-eating practice. His goal is to reduce his body fat, slowly drying himself from the inside out. Fat decays, muscle rots. But if one empties the body while still alive, there's a chance, however slim, that it might stay preserved after death. Historians agree that this practice was documented as early as the 11th century, though it reached its peak among the mountain ascetics of northern Japan in the 18th and 19th centuries. Fewer than 30 successful Sakushinbutsu are known to exist today. Most attempts failed. And yes, success here means his body did not decay. Today's obscure tidbit: practitioners of Sakushin Butsu sometimes chewed on the sap of the Yurishi tree, a lacquer-producing plant that's toxic in large amounts. The idea was to make their bodies unappealing to worms. You could say they wanted to lacquer themselves from the inside out. Historians still debate whether these monks saw their self-mummification as literal transcendence or a final teaching left behind in silence. Most likely, it was both. Outside the temple, the sun begins to rise. Slowly, of course. Everything here takes its time, and so does he. You begin to notice the details, the quiet rituals, the way he measures water by fingertip, not volume, the way he eats pine bark like someone savoring the last bite of a very serious meal. He carries no books, speaks little, and yet each day moves with the rhythm of a long, quiet plan. Tetsuya Kai now lives alone in a small hut near the edge of the cedar forest, just a short hike down from the main temple. It is not insulated. There is no firewood pile. Inside, a woven mat, a wooden bowl, a shallow shelf of dried roots, and a bamboo flute, which he sometimes plays after sunset softly, as though apologizing to the trees. He is 2 years into the Mokujitsu diet. His bones now press through his robe. His walk is slow, deliberate. His breath is shallower, but his eyes are sharp. There is no drama to this. No declaration, only repetition, day after day. Once a week, he climbs the mountain barefoot to a sacred spring. The water is bitter with minerals. He fills a small jug and carries it back. That's his only drink. You follow his gaze as he sits in zazen posture, watching a spider rebuild its web between 2 stones. A light rain begins to fall, not with urgency, but like a memory slipping back into place. Historical fact: Sakushin Butsu was not suicide, nor was it considered death. To the practitioners, it was transformation, a form of ultimate self-control, wherein the body became a vessel of enlightenment, a relic to be venerated. Local villagers, though, had mixed feelings. They offered food and bowed respectfully. Yes, but they also avoided walking near the monk's hut at night. There were whispers that a person turning into a relic could see both this world and the next, and might not be entirely alone. Today's unusual detail: in one recorded case, a monk reportedly asked to be buried in a chamber with a bell attached to a breathing tube. For days after the burial, villagers would listen for the bell, a sign he was still alive and meditating. When it stopped, they sealed the tomb. Historians still debate whether the bell was for communication or simply a way to mark the precise moment of passing into silence. Tetsuya Kai has not asked for a bell, yet. He still walks each morning, gathering pine needles and rootlets, drying them carefully in a cloth he sewed from old temple robes. He chews slowly, each motion purposeful. He's not hungry, not exactly. He's leaving, and that takes a different kind of appetite. At dusk, he bows 3 times to the west, and the forest faithful witness bows in return. You wait before him today, though barely. The air outside the hut is crisp and clear, the kind that hums faintly against your teeth when you breathe in. A fox crosses your path on the trail, pausing to glance back at you with a look that says, "You're not from here," before vanishing into the underbrush. Inside the hut, Tetsuya Kai is already upright. Not because he was sleeping, necessarily at this point. Rest is less sleep and more stillness. Like a candle that's been turned down, but not quite snuffed out. He kneels before a small altar, a bronze incense holder, a single photograph of Kukai, the founder of Shingon Buddhism, and a smooth stone with a crack shaped like a lightning bolt. He touches each one gently, in sequence, as if reminding them they're still part of the story. Today marks the beginning of a new phase. He has completed his 1,000 days of tree eating. His body is, to put it gently, almost entirely devoid of fat. His muscles have withered, but his posture remains strangely regal, as if his spine has made a private agreement with gravity. He will now begin drinking a special tea brewed from ureshi tree bark. This is where things turn, let's say, poetic. Ureshi sap, as you may know, is used in Japanese lacquerware. It's beautiful, glossy, and incredibly toxic. It causes severe inflammation in most people. In large, consistent doses, it helps render the body inhospitable to bacteria and insects after death. He drinks a small ladleful, eyes closed, face calm. You'd wince, you'd grimace. You might cough dramatically and reach for a lemon wedge. He just swallows, breathes, and waits. Historical fact: the ureshi tea phase of Sakushin Butsu usually lasted 100 days. It was a form of internal embalming and effort to preserve the self before death ever had its chance. Outside, the trees begin to blossom. Today's odd cultural note: some monks in this final stage would even bathe in cold rivers to toughen the skin and reduce bacterial exposure. One was said to have shaved his eyebrows so he could better feel the breeze of impermanence. Historians still debate whether the inclusion of ureshi tea was based on trial and error observation or passed down as a sacred instruction. Considering the outcome, both seem equally likely. In the afternoons now, Tetsurikai sits in his doorway, sun warming the bones beneath his skin, and carves tiny sutras into wooden slips with a dull blade. He doesn't rush. Each character takes several minutes. Sometimes he stops midway through a line and stares into the forest, like he's waiting for the punctuation to arrive on its own. You sit with him one afternoon as a deer edges close to the clearing, nose twitching. He doesn't move, doesn't blink. The deer lingers, watching, then wanders on. That evening, the flute returns. A soft note, uncertain at first, rising like the steam from his lacquered tea. The days pass like melted snow, gradual, quiet, and nearly unnoticed until they're gone. The forest path grows narrower as undergrowth creeps back into places it was once pushed from. Even the light feels slower, like it's treading carefully around someone in transition. Tetsurikai no longer walks. His legs are not broken, his body hasn't failed, but he has entered what the monks call Nyoru, a form of living stillness. His meals are now symbolic. A sip, a bite, sometimes just the act of holding the bowl before setting it down untouched. He is not dying. He is stepping away. Each morning, incense curls around the hut like a question that doesn't require an answer. You help prepare his chamber slowly, gently, as instructed. It is a small wooden room underground, barely large enough to sit upright in. The walls are lined with charcoal to absorb moisture. A single straw mat. A bell. A thin bamboo breathing tube poking through the ceiling to the surface. He has asked for no more than this. Historical fact: Sakushin Butsu chambers were often dug near temple grounds or holy mountains, and the burial was performed while the monk was still alive and fully conscious. An assistant would lower him in, provide the bell and tube, and then seal the top with clay, leaving the breathing hole open. He would meditate, still and silent, for as long as his body allowed. You help him descend the ladder. It creaks once, a soft sigh of old wood. He doesn't flinch. He sits cross-legged on the mat, adjusts his robes. His hands rest gently in his lap, one palm over the other, thumbs touching. The mudra of deep meditation, the kind that doesn't expect to be disturbed. You light the final stick of incense. Above, the tube is left open. A small bell hangs beside it. Today's curious cultural detail. In some regions, the breathing tube would be removed only after the bell stopped ringing for 3 consecutive days. This was the sign not of death, necessarily, but of stillness so complete it had crossed into permanence. Historians still debate whether this process was ever interrupted, ever reversed, or ever done entirely alone. The line between ritual and reality, after all, is thinner than most people are comfortable admitting. You return to the hut each morning. Sit by the tube. Listen. The bell rings. Then it doesn't. You don't sleep much the night the bell goes silent. Not from fear, not exactly from sadness either. It's something else. A kind of respectful unease, as if the forest itself has noticed that one of its listeners has gone still. Morning comes like breath held too long. You walk the familiar path to the chamber, carrying a bundle of cedar branches and white cloth. The earth is cool beneath your feet. The tube is quiet. You press your ear near it, half hoping for a mistake. But the bell remains still. There is no ceremony. Not yet, only closure. You and the other monks seal the tube, not with loud tools or shovels, but with careful handfuls of fine clay, smoothed like plaster, pressed in with palms and silence. You place the cedar branches across the surface in a rough square, not for show, just for directions, so that someday, if the soil gives, the chamber can be found again. Historical fact: monasteries typically waited 3 years before exhuming a Sakushin Butsu. It gave nature time to decide whether the attempt had succeeded. Most did not. Decay is patient and thorough, but just a few emerged whole, preserved without chemical, coffin, or coffin nail. You return to the temple with your hands covered in clay. No one speaks during the walk back. Not even the birds interrupt. That evening, an elder monk places a stone at the base of a cedar tree. It bears no name, only a single character: Mu. Nothingness. Not absence, but quiet. Today's strange cultural note. In some legends, it was said that a successful Sakushin Butsu could influence weather, that rain would fall gently when their chamber was open, or that birds would arrive to mark the day. One scroll mentions the wind pausing as if unsure it should pass. Historians still debate whether this belief arose from recorded patterns or from villagers seeking comfort in nature's alignment with human acts. But the stories persisted all the same. That night, it rains, just a little, soft as breath on the back of your hand. You sit on the temple steps, letting it dot your robe, the cedar branches, the edge of the worn path. You hear the bamboo flute, again played by someone else now, not as well, but enough to remember the shape of it. And somewhere beneath the forest floor, a man is still sitting. 3 years pass, quietly, of course. Nothing around here is in a rush. You tend the garden. You sweep the temple floor with the same old broom. You patch the roof, mend the slippers, and guide the newer monks through the rituals with a patience you didn't know you had. Life doesn't forget. It folds. Then one morning, you are summoned by the abbot. A plain request: bring tools, bring cloth, and come with care. The chamber will be opened today. The walk feels longer than you remember. The forest hasn't changed, but you have. Time does that, stealing inches, softening edges. The cedar tree marking the site is taller now. The stone is moss-covered, but the spot is the same. You dig slowly, layer by layer, clay and charcoal. Then the soft resistance of wood, aged into stone. The air when the lid is lifted is dry, still, neutral. You lower a lantern and peer inside. Tetsuya sits just as he was, knees crossed, hands folded, eyes gently closed. His robes have darkened with time. His skin has tightened across bone like parchment, but there is no rot, no collapse, no odor, only stillness, only form. It worked. Historical fact: there are at least 24 officially recognized Sakushin Butsu in Japan today, preserved and enshrined, most famously at Danichibo and Kurenji temples in Yamagata Prefecture. These monks are considered living Buddhas, not dead, but simply no longer active in the physical world. You wrap him gently in cloth, not for concealment, but for reverence. A cart has been prepared to carry him slowly. up the mountain path to the temple's inner sanctum. The forest does not speak, but it feels like it's watching. Back at the temple, the chamber is ready. High ceiling, cedar wall, smelling of incense and old prayers. He is placed upright on a carved seat, beneath a soft canopy, and surrounded by slips of scripture, written by those who followed his path, but chose to remain in the world. No glass, no pedestal, just a presence. Today's obscure cultural tidbit. In one preserved Sakushin Butsu case, a small string of prayer beads was found tucked between the monk's thumb and forefinger, wrapped so tightly that the beads had left indentations in the bone. A symbolic grip, perhaps, or just something to hold. Historians still debate the exact physiology of the process. How much of the preservation was the diet? How much the cold mountain air? How much the soil chemistry? And how much was simply the monk's stillness? No lab has replicated it successfully. No modern method dares to try. You sit before him in the candlelight, and for a long moment, nothing happens. Which, in this case, is everything. Days pass, but the room still holds its breath. You begin to notice how the light falls differently now in the temple's inner chamber, how it slows down at the doorway, hesitates, and then spills softly across the tatami, like it's entering a shrine inside a shrine. Even dust motes seem unsure whether to settle or drift. You sweep the floor in silence each morning, careful not to disturb the patterned lines around Tetsuya Kai's seated form. They've become sacred through repetition, like footsteps in an old house that creak exactly where they always have, even when no one is home. Visitors start arriving not in droves, but in quiet pairs. Pilgrims, local farmers, a boy with his grandmother, who brings a wrapped offering of dried persimmons. They don't speak loudly. They don't linger, but they bow, and some of them cry. Historical fact. After successful Sakushin Butsu were discovered, the monks were elevated to a special form of posthumous sainthood. They were not worshipped as gods, but venerated as Buddhas, who had chosen to remain in the earthly plane, suspended between mortality and the divine. You begin to see your own reflection in him, not literally, but in the way your body reacts to his presence. Your breath slows, your shoulders ease, you forget what time it is. There's something about sitting near someone who committed so fully to stillness that it begins to rub off on the furniture. Today's strange cultural tidbit. There is a tradition in some temples of offering dry rice and warm sake to a Sakushin Butsu once a year during the coldest part of winter, not to feed them, of course, but to symbolically warm the journey they are still undertaking quietly through time. Historians still debate how much of the Sakushin Butsu's preservation was understood by the monks themselves. Was it alchemical? Was it trial and error? Or was it simply faith made physical? In the afternoons, you find yourself humming the flute tune, the one he used to play. You don't know when you learned it. The abbot catches you one day and smiles, amused. He's teaching you, he says, as if that's the most normal thing in the world. And you believe him. Autumn finds the mountains without asking permission. The wind sharpens slightly. The trees lean in. Leaves the color of old coins drift across the temple roof. You add another blanket to your sleeping mat, and the floorboards creak more honestly than before. Inside the chamber, the air is still dry, but there's a new presence candles left by visitors. Rice offerings wrapped in hand-sewn cloth, and folded paper cranes that appear without note or explanation. Tetsuya Kai does not change. He remains upright, fingers folded, spine unyielding. The folds of his robe haven't moved in months, and yet every time you look at him, he feels slightly different. Not in body, something else. You are the one changing. Today you're tasked with dusting the canopy above him. It feels absurd, almost rude. But you climb the small stool and brush away the lightest veil of cobwebs, careful not to let a single thread drop onto his head. Your hand trembles not from fear, but from awe. Or perhaps it's just a quiet realization that you're dusting a man who hasn't blinked in years and yet somehow feels more present than you on most mornings. Historical fact: not all Sakushinbutsu were kept in temples. Some were returned to the mountains and enshrined in small, remote huts. Others were hidden, considered too sacred or too unsettling for display. One was reportedly kept in a locked cupboard for over 50 years before being rediscovered in perfect condition. Today's obscure detail: in a few rare instances, monks attempting Sakushinbutsu requested to be buried with a small wooden box containing their own childhood belongings, beads, scraps of cloth, even old sandals. These personal relics were intended to follow them into stillness, like dreams pressed between pages. Historians still debate whether these choices were deeply symbolic or simply gestures of comfort in a process that otherwise embraced total detachment. The light fades early now. You begin lighting the chamber candles at mid-afternoon. The waxy scent mixes with incense, settling into the old wood-like memory. You sit on the floor, leaning against a post, and close your eyes, not to sleep, but to match his stillness. The silence isn't heavy, it's spacious, like a hall so vast your thoughts echo softly into something quieter than you'd expected. Winter arrives not with fanfare, but like an old monk slipping quietly into the back row of a prayer hall present, but never interrupting. The ground crunches beneath your steps now, a thin layer of frost decorating the stone path like sugar on a rice cake. Even the crows seem to caw more softly. The temple breathes differently in the cold. The incense smoke hangs lower, moving less urgently. The doors creak less when opened, as if they too prefer to remain shut. You begin to notice how the chamber changes with the season. The stillness grows thicker in the cold, like it's been knit from layers of quiet. You add a small clay brazier to the room, not for warmth, exactly, but for atmosphere. The coals glow faintly beside Tsutsuyokai's feet, casting long, unwavering shadows. One morning, a visitor leaves behind a drawing, charcoal on rough paper, a likeness of the monk in repose, sketched with delicate precision. The drawing isn't signed, but something about the tilt of the head feels familiar. You leave it tucked behind a candle stand, unsure whether to display it or hide it. Historical fact: during the Edo period, Sakushinbutsu were both revered and feared. Some local lords encouraged the practice as a symbol of regional sanctity, while others outlawed it, calling it inhuman and unwholesome. Officially, the Japanese government banned the practice in the late 19th century, but not before several monks had already completed the process. That's right, self-mummification was eventually made illegal. Apparently, becoming a Buddha was frowned upon if it involved removing yourself from the population census. Today's strange cultural footnote. In one recorded case, villagers claimed that a nearby mummified monk could predict the weather, not by moving or speaking, just by feeling colder when snow was near. They swore by it for planting crops. Historians still debate whether this was poetic imagination or a symptom of room insulation failure. Your own predictions are more mundane. If the brazier's coals take too long to catch, snow is probably coming. You sit again this evening, watching the shadows on the wall shift as the candle burns lower. Tetsurakai doesn't blink, doesn't move, and yet his presence feels kind, not comforting in the way of warm soup or soft blankets, but in the way an old tree is comforting indifferent to your drama, but generous with its shade. You exhale slowly, matching his pace. On the third morning of snow, the forest becomes a dreamscape. Everything is soft, still, quiet enough that even your thoughts have to tiptoe. The trees wear powdery coats. The stream has frozen over in parts, forming tiny shelves where sparrows hop like tiny monks themselves, nervous, shivering, undecided. Inside, the chamber feels warmer than ever. You've added extra straw to the floor and draped a cotton curtain over the doorway to hold the heat. Someone has left a small envelope of tea at the entrance. A thank you, perhaps, or an offering. You spend part of the morning wiping down the statues in the adjoining hall. There's a Buddha whose smile seems wider in winter, and a cannon figure whose fingers have cracked from age but still extend in perfect compassion. You can't help but compare them to your Buddha, seated in silence just down the hall. He still hasn't moved, of course, but you find yourself talking to him now, quietly, casually, a word here, a thought there. It's not prayer, more like observation, commentary, as if you're keeping him updated on how the world is changing in the slowest, smallest ways. Snow's heavy today, you whisper. Roof might need checking. Or, sparrows have moved to the east wall again. Lazy little things. Historical fact. In many temples where Sakushinbatsu reside, caretakers were once considered spiritual extensions of the monk himself. Their job wasn't just maintenance, it was companionship. They weren't guarding a relic. They were attending to a presence. Today's obscure note. A 19th century monk who attempted Sakushinbatsu reportedly asked his attendant to read him poetry each night in the weeks leading to entombment. Not scripture poetry, especially haiku. One of his favorites. The snow falls again. Who taught the mountain silence so complete? Historians still debate whether this story is true or invented to romanticize the process. But it sounds nice, doesn't it? You begin reading haiku aloud in the evenings. Sometimes your voice cracks. Sometimes it doesn't. Tonight, you sit beside the brazier with a bowl of tea and 2 cups, one for you, one placed gently before him. The steam curls toward the ceiling. And outside, the snow keeps falling. The new year arrives not with bells or fireworks, but with the slow creak of thawing branches and a few brave drips of meltwater from the temple eaves. You mark the passing not by a calendar, but by the way the light shifts just slightly on Tetsurikai's folded robes in the afternoon. You've begun to forget the exact number of days he's been seated in the chamber. It's not neglect, it's rhythm. You no longer measure time in weeks, but in incense sticks, candle stubs, and the changing tempo of your own heartbeat. Today, a scholar arrives. He wears city shoes and squints, as if trying to read the wind. He bows before entering, speaks softly, and carries a leather satchel that looks too modern for this place. You watch as he inspects the chamber, notebook in hand, measuring the room in quiet glances. He asks no disrespectful questions. He simply sits, for a long time. Then, with the most respectful whisper you've heard all year, he says, "It's quieter in here than outside." You nod. You understand. Historical fact. The process of Sakushinbatsu was seen not as death, but as a transition. In some regions, monks who completed the process were believed to continue meditating beyond death, fully aware, fully present. They were called Nirezon, or Tathgata figures, embodied wisdom. Today's obscure cultural moment. One preserved Sakushinbutsu was reportedly seated facing a temple wall, rather than the entrance. When asked why, the temple records state, "He has turned toward the mountain because the world has turned its back on itself." Historians still debate whether this was metaphor, misdirection, or simply a poetic accident in translation. The scholar departs quietly, leaving a note tucked beneath a stone. "I didn't believe in peace until today." You leave it where it is. That night, the wind picks up. It howls briefly over the ridgeline and disappears. You sit by the stove, sipping warm barley tea, watching candlelight flicker against the unmoving silhouette. For a moment, the flicker casts a second shadow beside him. You do not check twice. You simply breathe. Spring arrives like a whispered promise you don't want to jinx. The snow recedes in patches, revealing soil the color of ink and moss the texture of old wool. The temple grounds return to life, not all at once, but like someone easing into a warm bath. Even the carp in the pond resume their lazy orbits, golden and indifferent. You sweep the courtyard and discover crocus buds poking through cracks in the stone. You remember planting them months ago, thinking they might not survive the cold. Apparently, they disagreed. Inside the chamber, a small group of pilgrims lights candles. They chant softly, not words, really, but tones that ripple along the old cedar beams. You sit behind them, just far enough back not to interrupt, close enough to hear when the youngest among them begins to cry, not out of sadness, out of stillness. The group leaves behind a string of Juzu prayer beads, smooth and worn-laid, gently in the monk's lap. You do not move them. You simply note their presence. Historical fact: while the process of sakushin butsu is no longer practiced, some temples continue to care for the preserved monks as living members of their religious community. Robes are refreshed, rooms are cleaned, seasonal offerings are made. Silence is observed. Today's odd cultural detail. At one point in the mid-20th century, there was talk of placing one sakushin butsu on a rotating tour of temples across Japan as a traveling relic. The plan was quietly dropped after a senior monk reportedly said, "He has walked far enough." Historians still debate whether this anecdote is true or invented by temple elders trying to preserve dignity. Either way, it worked. You spend that evening reciting poetry aloud again. But tonight, you compose your own. Stone silent teacher. You sit as the pine trees bloom and I forget time. You smile, not because it's brilliant, but because it feels like a conversation. And some part of you, small, unsure, but quietly growing, begins to wonder. If I sat long enough, would I listen better too? The temple's bell tower collects pollen now, instead of snow. You find yourself wiping yellow dust from the floorboards as bees meander through open windows, interested in nothing in particular. Even the sparrows seem less nervous. Inside the chamber, the season is subtle. No breeze, no blossom, but you sense it anyway. The smell of the wood is shifted. The incense smoke curls differently, now higher, more playful. The candle wax pools instead of leaning. You begin preparing for Gon, the anniversary of Tetsuya Kai's passing into stillness. It is not a funeral, not a memorial. It is more like a birthday, if the person being celebrated has outgrown the idea of time. The other monks hang white banners and arrange fresh offerings, mountain herbs, spring water in lacquered cups, dried citrus slices. You polish the floor around his seat until it reflects your movements like a rippling stream. Then you trim the hem of his robe. Gently, respectfully. The edges have frayed with time, as all things do. You use a dull blade, the one he once used to carve sutras. The fibers resist slightly, as if reluctant to separate. Historical fact: the practice of maintaining a sakushin butsu was seen as a sacred duty, passed from generation to generation. Young monks were trained in caretaking rituals, how to clean around the body without touching it, how to read silence as speech, how to bow in a way that didn't disturb the dust. Today's strange but gentle custom. In some temples, caretakers whisper small updates to the monk each season. Not prayers, not confessions, just updates. The apricot tree is blooming early this year. Or, we had to chase a raccoon from the rice shed again. Historians still debate whether these were spiritual communications or simply acts of affection. But the tradition persists. At dusk, the Gon ceremony begins. You light a single candle, place a fresh cloth across his shoulders, and offer the first bowl of tea. Visitors line up quietly, leaving flowers, coins, folded poems, and once, a packet of sunflower seeds. The final chant is brief and low, and when the hall clears out, you stay behind. Not to clean, not to reflect, just to sit beside him, not in imitation, not in awe, but in echo. Time begins to fold, not in dramatic loops or vanishing hours, but in the gentlest possible way. You start forgetting what year it is, not from age or forgetfulness, but because it doesn't seem especially relevant. The seasons mark things more clearly than calendars now. Your chores remain the same. Sweep the hall, tend the herbs, keep the chamber clean. But your thoughts take longer to arrive these days. You find yourself staring out at the mountains for whole afternoons, unsure if 5 minutes or 5 hours have passed. And always he is there, unmoving. You know every fold of his robe now, every angle of shadow beneath his chin, the tiny split in the wooden base where the grain shifted in a damp season years ago. None of it surprises you, yet none of it bores you either. One afternoon, a woman arrives with a sketch pad and 3 children. She asks permission to draw. You nod. She stays until the light begins to fade, her youngest asleep on her shoulder. She leaves behind a drawing. A monk seated in stillness, surrounded by the outline of a tree that grows upward from him, branches reaching out. Historical fact. At Danichibo Temple in Japan, the Sakushinbutsu of Shinyokai Shanin has been preserved and venerated for over 130 years. His robes are occasionally changed. His presence remains the central spiritual axis of the temple. He is, in every sense, still part of the community. Today's lesser-known anecdote. There is a belief in some villages that Sakushinbutsu radiate protection, not through miracles, but through emotional steadiness. In times of earthquake or storm, people still gather near their chambers, feeling safer just by being in proximity. Historians still debate the psychological versus metaphysical roots of this comfort. But comfort, it turns out, doesn't require citation. You sit beside him again tonight, hands folded, eyes half closed. A moth flutters through the chamber, silent and golden. You don't move to catch it. And when it lands briefly on your sleeve, you wonder just for a moment if he sent it. As a reminder, or perhaps just a joke. The years have blurred, not in forgetting, but in softening. You're older now. Your joints crack a little when you stand. Your back doesn't bow quite so deeply when you sweep the floor. You move more slowly, though no one seems to mind, especially not him. Tetsuyo Kai remains unchanged, perfectly preserved, perfectly still, perfectly there. The wooden base beneath him bears your repairs now, sanded gently, oiled in spring. His robes have been replaced twice since you arrived, and you remember every thread. You once joked to the young monks that tailoring a Buddha was a terrifying honor. They didn't laugh, but you could swear the flicker of candlelight at his cheek moved just slightly. New monks have arrived, some already gone on. You've taught 3 how to clean the chamber properly, 2 how to sit in silence without scratching, 1 how to light incense without coughing. None have stayed as long as you. You no longer read poetry aloud each night, but sometimes you whisper phrases to him, 1-word prayers, little fragments of your day. Rain, carp, lonely, enough. Historical fact. In some temples, caretakers of Sakushinbutsu were buried near their monks, not by order, but by choice. The role was never assigned. It was inherited by time and devotion. A quiet lineage of those who stayed long enough to stop measuring time in days. Today's little-known cultural detail. Some temples celebrate the monk's birthday twice each year, once on the day of their original birth, and once on the day of their entombment. A kind of full circle, a pair of bookends on the shelf of silence. Historians still debate whether the caretakers came to resemble their monks over time, or whether the stillness simply became contagious. Either way, it's said that the eyes of those who stayed longest held the same depth as the preserved ones they watched over. Tonight, the wind is soft. You sit by the brazier, your tea cooling slowly in the cup. The flames flicker just once, and settle again. You look to him, the old monk in his eternal seat. Tomorrow's the planting festival, you murmur. No answer, but somehow you feel heard. And now you rest, You let the seasons fall away. You let the snow melt from your shoulders, and the blossoms drift from your thoughts. You allow time to slip its leash and wander off without you. Breathe in slowly, the scent of cedar, of incense, of silence. Let it settle into your chest, low and quiet, like something long forgotten finally returning home. Breathe out gently. Let your muscles loosen. Let the edges of the room soften. Let the monk fade, not in presence, but in urgency. He does not ask to be remembered. He simply is. Feel the floor beneath you, the stillness of wood that has been walked on for generations, the whisper of wind through temple eaves, the hush of candlelight as it flickers toward sleep. Let go of the questions now. There is no need to understand why he sat, why he chose stillness, why the world sometimes spins around someone who no longer moves. Let it be enough that he did, and that you, tonight, were here to witness it. You are not being asked to vanish, to mummify, to transcend, just to pause, to breathe, to rest, to sit like him in the moment that holds you now. The forest outside hums, the mountain leans close. The stars blink slowly, like they're remembering their lines in a very old play. And you? You're part of it all. Good night.